Well, hello, product managers, offering managers, and enthusiasts of each. Whether you're looking to break into product management from a military background like I did once, or whether you're applying at IBM and you're wondering what's the difference between product management and offering management, or if you're an offering manager at IBM and you're just getting your bearings around what is an offering, and we talk about it, especially if you work on internal offerings, those that we create intended to help our fellow IBMers, this may be of particular interest to you because this is something I hear very frequently from all those different groups of people. So this is a fairly short vignette to try and explain what I understand to be the understanding and the point of view of IBM on what is an offering versus what is not, and what is an offering manager. And I also want to illustrate just how challenging it is to try and get an answer to that question, how we're never really going to be done. We're just going to continue iterating closer and closer to an answer that we may all align to. So the name of this vignette is, He Said We Were a Feature, Not a Product. And I want you to be asking yourself in the back of your mind while we get to it, who could have said something like that? So what is an offering at IBM? And what do we mean when we say an offering at IBM? An offering is a product or service or some set of them designed for a market of users who will value the end-to-end experience of the offering, from discover, try, buy, to support, enough to pay for and use the offering in sufficient numbers to successfully grow or sustain the offering's business model. Pretty wordy, right? But each word in there carries information, and it's really important to understand it. I really want to focus in on how this differentiates from product management in IBM's history. So IBM is a very long-standing company. It's a little bit old. It's a little bit mature, especially compared to some of our younger technology company competitors. And because of that, we have a lot of history. And if you think that IBM was originally the CTRC, the computing, tabulating, recording company, and that initially it sold things like clocks, and it sold things like scales, and it broke into computing by having these tabulating machines. And you think, what would a product manager do in that sort of world? And how would you have to adapt as a company to come into a modern software world? It's going to start to get you thinking about what we're talking about here. So product managers in the past at IBM focused too much on the use phase, not on the discover, the try, the buy, and then carrying past productive use into support and upgrade and advocacy. So IBM changed this discipline to bring a more holistic point of view to it. So it's the offering manager's job to own the contacts with marketing to make sure that it's positioned correctly in the market, to own the connections with design to make sure that it's creating an experience that's really delightful for the user to use, to be connected with finance to make sure that we're meeting those business goals that we need to continue sustaining this offering in the market, with development so that it can be built and continue to be built and continue to be offered and provided in operations, and with support to make sure that the needs are being met. So you're starting to get a sense that you're very much in the middle of everything, and you have to be, and that is why we call it an offering manager. Now, when you think about for an internal offering, some of those things change a little bit. They're all there, but you kind of have to start squinting some to really make sense of it, because you're no longer earning external revenue. And even though the offering managers at IBM's that face the revenue side of the market, they have to keep in mind the difference between a buyer and a user, which some of our younger competitors don't necessarily have to do. Sometimes more they have buyers that are users. Whenever we get into enterprise software, there is a separation between buyer and user, and that becomes even more distinct when we do something internal, where there is someone who's investing and funding, and very often there is not really a direct chargeback to who would be a buyer, a business unit maybe, or a functional leader that's really getting the benefit that might lead to them to buy a software package. But since it's internal and it's offered without chargeback, they don't necessarily have to. So as an internal offering manager, you just have to continue thinking through it, similar to how you would think about it if you were in a market-facing offering. So an internal offering is a program, solution, or service with quantifiable business outcomes. And that's where it's really important to focus, that solves the needs of IBM and IBMers both. So it's got to have corporate benefit to the whole company and IBMer benefit to the individual user and to the managers that work inside of IBM within their end-to-end experience. We're not talking just about one piece of it, not just a tool, but entirety of an offering. Now, it can be made up of multiple capabilities or tools that enable the user to complete a specific step within their experience. A lot of words, doesn't really fix it. There's links here, so if you're internal to IBM, this will take you somewhere that you can actually get a little bit more information. But I'm going to talk a little bit more next about why this is so difficult for us to define. He said we were a feature, not a product. And I asked you earlier, who would have said such a thing? And when you look at this image, You're probably guessing this is a Steve Jobs kind of thing to say. It's a little bit abrasive, and also, who is that other guy? I don't recognize him. You may not recognize him, but you'll recognize the company that he founded. That is Drew Houston. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I read that it is pronounced like the street in New York and not the town in Texas. I'm not from New York, so I think it's Drew Houston. So anyway, Dropbox and Apple, both very famous companies. These are both CEOs of very successful technology companies. And early on, when Drew was talking with Steve about what they were creating, the offering that they were creating in Dropbox, Steve told him, that's not a product, that's a feature. Well, when you look at the size that Drew's business has grown to in 2020, 15.4 million users, and you look at the revenue, 1 year revenue of 1.9 billion, gee, Steve, that really sounds like a product. And yet, if you look at what Steve was talking about, which is iCloud, the file storage and sharing service that is native to Apple, which has 620 million users and revenue somewhere in the 64 billion, but divided out by the fact that it's a bundle, the Apple Store, music, Apple Card payments. There's a lot of things rolling up into that, so it's not necessarily fair, but I think it is fair to say that with 620 million users, almost an order of magnitude greater, that their revenue is probably about an order of magnitude greater than Dropbox's is. So who is right? Is this a product? Is it a feature? Yes. The answer is yes. These are both products. And yes, one is so large, iCloud and Apple is so large a platform that nesting and offering even a multi-billion-dollar one into it as a feature or a component is reasonable. But it is still an offering. It still gets a job done, it still needs managing, it still meets metrics, and it still needs grading. It needs to be held to those quantifiable business metrics. I promise that there is a large product management team for iCloud inside of inside of Apple, and therefore it's recognized within Apple that this is absolutely a product, an offering. There are almost definitely subcomponents within it that have product managers that focus even more narrowly on components within it that can be defined as products and have quantifiable business metrics. So, this is primarily intended to give an overview of offering management, how it compares to product management, and just how challenging it can be for someone to ask you to define offering management, what it is and what it isn't, and what a component is and what a feature is and what a product is, because the answer is much more ambiguous than that. And if some of the greatest product minds in our history, both successful launchers of multi-billion-dollar, multi-million user revenue products, can't come to a concise and agreed definition, we are probably going to be challenged to do so as well. So let's keep that in mind, and let's keep working together towards a common understanding that's useful to us, that helps us to solve the needs and get those jobs done for our users and our buyers. I'm Richard I. Porter. This has been a brief vignette, not as brief as I'd intended, but a brief vignette about product management, offering management, and is it a product or is it a feature? Thank you.